The soft hum of distant voices and the faint clink of silverware drift through the ballroom, warm lights spilling over marble floors and towering columns like a promise of perfection. Everything here feels curated, expensive, untouchable. And yet, at the center of it all, the bride does not belong. She stands beneath a cathedral veil, still, quiet, her fingers lightly gripping the edge of white lace as if it might anchor her to something real. Lena Hart keeps her gaze lowered, breathing slow, steady, like she has rehearsed this moment 1,000 times and still expects it to break apart. Across from her, Adrian Cole waits, tall, composed, a man who built an empire by controlling outcomes before they could surprise him. His tuxedo fits perfectly, his expression even more so. This wedding is not love. It is leverage, a transaction, a clean solution to a messy inheritance dispute. He had agreed to it without hesitation, assuming the woman chosen for him would be acceptable, forgettable, easy to ignore. He had not expected to feel this flicker of resistance, this subtle discomfort tightening in his chest as the officiant finishes speaking and the room falls into a waiting silence. "You may kiss the bride." The words land softly, almost irrelevant. Adrian doesn't move. Not yet. Instead, he studies her, the outline of a face hidden behind layers of fabric, the faint shadow of something uneven beneath it. Imperfect. Not what he would have chosen. "Take it off," he says, his voice low, controlled, meant only for her. No tenderness, no curiosity, just a quiet command. Lena's hands rise, slow, deliberate, lifting the veil away. The room seems to hold its breath with her. A faint scar traces along her jaw, catching the light for just a second before disappearing into shadow. It is not grotesque, not even striking, just enough to break symmetry, to ruin the illusion of flawless beauty that men like Adrian have always expected from the women beside them. His eyes shift, not lingering, not searching, simply deciding. And then he turns away. This marriage is just a deal. The sentence falls between them, final, practiced, already distancing. Around them, applause begins, polite, obligatory, cameras flashing, capturing a moment that looks perfect from far enough away. But up close, something fractures. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a small, quiet shift in the air, like a promise that will never be spoken out loud. Lena lowers her hands, veil falling behind her shoulders, her expression unchanged, unreadable, as if she has already accepted something Adrian has not even realized he has taken from her. She does not argue. She does not flinch. She simply stands there, composed in a way that feels almost dangerous, because it suggests she is not the one losing control of this moment. Adrian tells himself it doesn't matter. This is temporary. 1 year, a contract, a clean exit. Nothing about this woman will touch his real life. And yet, as the music swells and guests step forward, congratulating, smiling, pretending not to notice, he feels something unfamiliar settle beneath his certainty. Not attraction, not regret, just a quiet, persistent sense that he has misread something important, something that will not stay hidden forever. If you've ever misjudged someone in a single glance, or believed you understood a story before it even began, stay with me, because this is where everything starts to change, and nothing will unfold the way you expect, so don't look away, not yet. And when you think you've seen the truth, remember how easy it is to be wrong. Then come back with me to the man who thought he had everything under control. Let's return to the main character, because Adrian Cole has no idea that the woman he just dismissed will become the one thing he cannot replace, cannot predict, and cannot forget. And somewhere beneath the quiet applause, beneath the polished surface of wealth and control, a different story has already begun to move, slow, unseen, inevitable, like a crack spreading through glass that no one notices until it finally shatters everything. Morning does not arrive gently in Adrian Cole's world. It arrives on schedule, precise and indifferent, filtered through floor-to-ceiling glass that overlooks a city already moving without him, as if it never needed him at all. The penthouse is silent, immaculate, untouched by anything that might suggest two people live here, instead of one carefully controlled life extended to include a stranger. Adrian stands at the kitchen island, black coffee untouched, eyes scanning the skyline as if numbers and contracts might be hidden between the buildings, something predictable, something he understands. Behind him, there is the faintest sound, not footsteps exactly, more like presence, soft and intentional. Lena moves through the space, as if she has already learned the rhythm of a place she does not belong to, careful not to disturb anything, careful not to ask. She does not greet him. She does not expect to be greeted. Instead, she sets a small ceramic cup near the stove, fills it with water, and begins slicing fruit with a precision that feels practiced, almost meditative. Adrian notices, not because he is curious, but because it is different. Most people in his life try to be seen. She is trying to disappear. You do not have to do that, he says without turning. His voice carries across the marble, even, distant. Lena pauses for half a second, then continues. I'm not doing it for you. The answer lands without edge, without defiance, simply a statement that does not invite argument. Adrian turns then, studying her properly for the first time in daylight. Without the veil, without the shadows of last night, the details are clearer, the scar softer, less defined, almost irrelevant if he allows himself to look long enough. He does not. You should speak to Claire, he says, already shifting back into routine. She will organize your schedule, appearances, anything you need to maintain the image. Image. The word hangs there, heavier than it should. Lena rinses the knife, dries her hands, and finally meets his gaze, not challengingly, not submissively, just directly. I read the contract, she says. I know what is required. There is something in the way she says it that makes Adrian wonder, briefly, what else she read, what else he signed without considering. But the thought passes. It always does. Control returns easily when you have practiced it your entire life. Hours later, the city becomes noise beneath tinted windows as a black car carries them toward their first appearance as a married couple, a charity luncheon where reputation is currency and every glance is calculated. Adrian scrolls through messages, barely aware of her beside him until a notification flashes across his screen, a photograph already circulating online, taken less than 12 hours ago. Him. Her. The headline is polite, but the comments beneath are not. He does not need to read them to know the tone. He has lived long enough inside this world to understand exactly how people react to anything that does not meet expectation. He locks the phone without comment. Lena has not looked. Or maybe she has and chosen not to show it. The car stops. Doors open. Cameras wait. Adrian steps out first, offering his hand not out of instinct, but obligation. For a fraction of a second, she hesitates, not out of fear, but calculation, as if measuring something invisible. Then she places her hand in his. It is warm, steady, not clinging. Together, they step into the light. Voices rise, questions overlap, flashes blur the edges of reality into something performative, something distant. Adrian answers smoothly, controlled, practiced. Lena remains quiet, present but not participating, her silence drawing more attention than any statement could. A reporter leans forward, smiling too brightly. Mrs. Cole, how does it feel stepping into this new life? The question is simple, harmless on the surface, but layered beneath it is expectation, curiosity, judgment waiting to be confirmed. Lena turns slightly, just enough to face the voice, her expression calm, almost thoughtful. It feels, she says slowly, choosing each word as if it matters, like a place that has not decided what it wants to be yet. There is a pause, brief but noticeable, something unplanned slipping through the script. Adrian glances at her, not correcting, not interrupting, just observing. For the first time since the contract was signed, since the veil was lifted, since he decided exactly who she was, something does not align. Not enough to matter. Not yet. But enough to stay. And as they move forward, deeper into a world that will measure her, define her, reduce her, Adrian finds himself watching not what she shows, but what she withholds, because somewhere in that quiet restraint, there is a story he has not accounted for, a variable he cannot calculate, and it lingers just beneath the surface, waiting for the moment it refuses to stay hidden any longer. By the end of the week, the penthouse no longer feels entirely untouched, but it does not feel shared either. It feels divided in a way that cannot be seen, like two lives running parallel without ever crossing. Adrian notices it in small, inconvenient ways, the kind that disrupt routine just enough to be felt, but not acknowledged. The guest room remains empty, the master bedroom occupied by one side of the bed, untouched on the other. The kitchen changes subtly, a ceramic cup always left near the window, a sketchbook, sometimes resting on the counter before disappearing again as if it was never meant to be seen. Lena does not ask for anything, and that, more than anything else, unsettles him. People always want something from him, attention, approval, money, proximity to power, but she moves through his life as if none of those currencies apply to her, as if she is waiting for something else entirely. On Friday afternoon, Adrian returns earlier than expected, a canceled meeting leaving a gap in his schedule that feels unfamiliar, almost inconvenient. The penthouse is quiet, but not empty. He hears the faint scratch of pencil against paper before he sees her. Lena sits on the floor near the window, legs folded beneath her, the city stretching endlessly behind her like a backdrop she refuses to claim. The sketchbook is open across her lap, pages filled with lines that are not tentative but certain, deliberate in a way that suggests she is not imagining, but remembering. Adrian does not announce himself. He stands there for a moment, watching, something in the stillness of the scene holding him in place. "You should not sit on the floor," he says finally, breaking it. Lena does not startle. She looks up slowly, as if she had already known he was there. "Why?" she asks. "Because it is not how things are supposed to look?" The question lands differently than it should. Adrian steps closer, his gaze dropping to the sketchbook before he can stop himself. It is not a random design. It is his building. The same structure, the same exterior lines, but inside, everything is different. Softer, warmer, human. Hallways that open instead of narrow, light that moves instead of traps, spaces that feel lived in rather than displayed. "What is this?" he asks, though the answer is obvious. Lena closes the sketchbook halfway, not hiding it, but not offering it either. "It is what your building could have been," she says quietly, "if someone cared about the people inside it." The words are not sharp, but they do not need to be. Adrian straightens, something defensive rising instinctively. "It is a commercial structure," he replies. "It is not meant to feel personal." Lena studies him for a second longer than necessary, and for the first time, there is something almost like curiosity in her expression, as if she is trying to understand a language. She has no interest in learning. "That is the problem," she says, and then she stands, brushing invisible dust from her hands. The conversation already over for her, even though it has just begun for him. That night, Adrian cannot sleep. The city below is restless, alive, indifferent, but his mind keeps returning to lines drawn in graphite, to a version of his work that does not align with the version he built his success on. He tells himself it does not matter. It is an opinion, nothing more. And yet, the next morning, when he walks through one of his own buildings, something shifts. The lobby feels colder than he remembers. The lighting harsher. The space impressive, but empty in a way that suddenly feels intentional instead of inevitable. He moves through it differently now, not as the man who designed it, but as someone seeing it for the first time. Later, back at the penthouse, he finds the sketchbook again, left open on the counter as if it is not meant to be hidden anymore. This time, he does not hesitate. He turns the page, and then another. Each design builds on the last, evolving, refining, telling a story he cannot fully piece together but cannot ignore either. At the bottom of one page, there is a note, written smaller than the rest, almost as if it was not meant to be read. "A place should never make you feel smaller than you already are." Adrian stares at the words longer than he expects to, something in them landing deeper than logic allows. For the first time, he does not see her as an obligation, or a mistake, or even a variable he can control. He sees her as a question, and he has never liked questions he cannot answer. But this one does not go away. It lingers, persistent, quiet, impossible to ignore. And somewhere between the lines she drew and the life he built, a thought begins to form, slow and unwelcome, pressing against everything he believes he understands. Was she really the one who did not belong in his world? Or was it possible that he had built a world that never knew how to belong to anyone at all? And if that was true, then what exactly had he just brought into his life? A problem to manage, or the one person who could see everything he had been too blind to notice? The invitation arrives in the afternoon, thick ivory cardstock edged in gold, placed carefully on the glass table as if it belongs there more than anything else in the room. Adrian does not need to read it to know what it represents. Another event, another room filled with people who measure worth in silence and smiles. He picks it up anyway, scanning the details with practiced indifference. A private investor's gala, held at one of his flagship properties, the kind of night designed to reinforce power without ever needing to say it out loud. "You will attend," he says, not asking, already turning away as if the answer has been decided for her. Lena stands near the window, the city reflecting faintly across the glass, her expression unreadable as always. "It is part of the contract," she replies, her voice even, neither agreeing nor resisting, just stating fact. The evening unfolds with precision. A black car, polished floors, chandeliers that hang like captured light. Guests move in clusters, voices low, laughter controlled, everything curated to feel effortless when it is anything but. Adrian steps into it seamlessly, shaking hands, exchanging measured words, his presence filling the space in a way that feels both natural and constructed. Lena walks beside him, quiet, observant, her gaze moving across the room not with admiration, but with awareness, as if she is mapping something no one else sees. At first, the attention is subtle. A glance here, a whisper there. Then it grows. Conversations pause a second too long. Eyes linger. The difference between them becomes the center of gravity in a room that pretends not to notice. Adrian feels it before he acknowledges it, the shift in energy, the unspoken question hanging in every interaction. He does nothing to correct it. He does not pull her closer. He does not introduce her with warmth. He simply allows the room to decide what it wants to believe. And it does. A woman approaches, elegant, poised, the kind of presence that commands attention without asking for it. Victoria Hale, one of the largest shareholders, someone Adrian has known long enough to predict but not control. Her smile is perfect. Her eyes are not. Adrian, she greets, her tone smooth, measured. Then her gaze shifts to Lena, assessing, calculating, pausing just long enough to make the silence noticeable. So this is your wife. The words are neutral, but the meaning beneath them is not. Lena meets her gaze, calm, steady, offering nothing in return except presence. Victoria tilts her head slightly, as if considering something trivial. I suppose, she continues, her voice light enough to pass as conversation. It is refreshing to see someone so unexpected beside you. A few nearby guests glance over, subtle but attentive, the kind of moment that travels quickly without ever being announced. Adrian hears it. He understands exactly what is happening, and he lets it continue. Not out of cruelty, but out of habit. Control, for him, has always meant choosing when to intervene, and right now, he chooses not to. Lena does not react immediately. She does not defend herself. She does not look at Adrian for support. Instead, she studies Victoria for a brief second, as if deciding whether the moment deserves anything at all. Unexpected does not mean unworthy, she says finally, her voice quiet but clear, carrying just enough to shift the air around them. There is no edge, no anger, just truth delivered without apology. For a fraction of a second, the room recalibrates. Victoria's smile tightens, almost imperceptibly, before she recovers, turning back to Adrian as if the exchange never mattered. We will speak later, she says, already dismissing the moment. The conversation moves on. The music continues. The night resumes its polished rhythm. But something does not settle. Adrian feels it as they move through the crowd, as introductions blur and conversations repeat, as the space he has always navigated with ease begins to feel slightly misaligned. Not broken, just off. And the source of it stands beside him, unchanged, unaffected, as if she has already stepped outside the rules everyone else is still following. Hours later, when they finally step away from the crowd, into a quieter hallway lined with glass and shadow, Adrian stops walking. The silence here is different, honest. He turns to her, something unspoken pressing at the edge of his control. You could have ignored it, he says, not quite a question, not quite a statement. Lena looks at him, her expression softer than before, but no less certain. So could you, she replies. The words are simple, but they land with a weight he does not expect. For the first time, the gap between them is not just about status or appearance. It is about choice, about what is allowed to happen and what is not stopped. Adrian does not answer. He cannot, not in a way that feels true. And as they stand there, separated by nothing more than a few feet of quiet space, he realizes something he has never needed to consider before. Control is not just about what you do. It is about what you allow. And tonight, he allowed something that cannot be undone. The question that follows is quieter, more dangerous, settling into the part of him that rarely questions itself. If she can stand in a room designed to diminish her and remain unchanged, then what does that say about the man who built the room and chose to let it happen? The days after the gala do not return to normal, because something subtle has shifted, not in the space itself, but in the way Adrian moves through it, as if he is now aware of edges he never noticed before. The penthouse feels quieter, not because Lena has changed, but because he is listening differently. He notices the absence of sound where he once ignored it, the way she occupies space without claiming it, the way she leaves no trace except the things she chooses not to hide. The sketchbook appears more often now, never placed directly in front of him, but never fully concealed either, as if it exists in a space between invitation and indifference. One evening, he finds it open again on the dining table, a page half-finished, graphite lines forming the interior of a residential complex. But unlike his designs, this one breathes, the layout flowing naturally, sunlight drawn in deliberate strokes, corners softened, spaces widened just enough to feel human. He does not touch it immediately. Instead, he stands there, studying it, trying to understand what it is about her work that unsettles him more than it should. It is not just that it is different. It is that it feels right in a way he has never prioritized. You keep leaving this where I can see it, he says when she enters the room. Lena pauses near the doorway, her gaze flicking briefly to the sketchbook before returning to him. "Do I?" she replies, not confirming, not denying. Adrian exhales quietly, a gesture so small it would have gone unnoticed before. "You think my work is flawed," he says, more directly now. Lena walks closer, not to defend her drawings, but to close the distance just enough that the conversation cannot remain distant. "I think your work is efficient," she answers. "It does what it is supposed to do." Adrian waits, knowing there is more. There always is. "But it does not consider how it feels to stay inside it," she adds. The words linger, not as criticism, but as observation, and that makes them harder to dismiss. Later that week, Adrian visits one of his older developments, a luxury apartment building that has always been considered one of his most successful projects. He walks through it with new eyes, slower this time, not as a businessman reviewing assets, but as someone searching for something he cannot name. The lobby is grand, polished, impressive, but the echo of footsteps feels too sharp, the lighting too cold, the seating arranged more for symmetry than comfort. He notices a woman sitting alone near the window, her posture slightly hunched, her gaze fixed on her phone, and for the first time, he wonders if the space is working against her instead of for her. It is a thought he would have dismissed a week ago. Now it stays. When he returns home, he finds Lena on the balcony, the city stretched out beneath her, her hair moving slightly in the evening air, her expression distant but not disconnected. He hesitates before joining her, something about the quiet between them no longer feeling empty, but full of things unsaid. "Why do you draw them like that?" he asks, his voice lower than usual, less controlled, more honest than he intends. Lena does not turn immediately. She watches the city for a moment longer before answering. "Because buildings shape people more than people realize," she says softly. "If a place feels cold, people become smaller inside it. If it feels open, they breathe differently." Adrian studies her profile, the faint line of her scar catching the last light of the day, not as a flaw, but as something that has survived. "And you think I have been making people smaller?" he asks. Lena finally turns, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "I think you never asked what it felt like," she replies. There is no accusation in her tone, only clarity, and somehow that makes it heavier. Adrian looks away first, something unfamiliar settling in his chest, not discomfort exactly, but awareness, the kind that cannot be undone once it forms. That night, he cannot return to the version of himself that existed before she walked into his life, because now there is a question threaded through everything he built, every decision he made, every space he designed. It is not loud. It does not demand an answer. It simply exists, persistent, impossible to ignore. And as he stands alone in a home that suddenly feels less complete than it did before, he realizes something he has never considered, that perhaps success was never about building something impressive, but about building something that could actually hold a person without making them feel like they needed to leave it to find themselves again. And if that is true, then what has he really been creating all this time? Structures that stand tall, or spaces that quietly push people away without ever meaning to? And more importantly, why is it that the one person he thought he could ignore is now the only one making him question everything he thought he understood? The shift does not happen all at once. It never does with someone like Adrian Cole. It happens in small decisions that feel insignificant in the moment, but begin to reshape everything underneath. It starts with a meeting he was not supposed to attend personally, a mid-level design review for a new residential project on the west side, something he would normally approve with a signature and a brief glance at the numbers. But this time, he walks in and sits at the head of the table, not speaking immediately, just listening, watching the presentation unfold in clean lines and efficient layouts that once would have satisfied him without question. The lead architect gestures confidently, explaining circulation flow, maximizing square footage, optimizing light exposure, all the things Adrian has built his empire on. And yet, as the slides move forward, something feels missing, not visually, not structurally, but emotionally, like a conversation that never asks the right question. "Where do people sit when they come home?" Adrian asks suddenly, his voice cutting through the room in a way that makes everyone pause. The architect hesitates, thrown off by the simplicity of it. "There is a living area," he replies carefully, pointing to the layout. Adrian studies the blueprint, then shakes his head slightly. "Not where the furniture goes," he says. "Where they actually choose to be." The room goes quiet, the kind of silence that signals something has shifted, even if no one can name it yet. Later that evening, he returns to the penthouse earlier than usual, his mind still circling that same question, that same feeling of something incomplete. Lena is in the kitchen this time, not cooking, just standing near the counter with her sketchbook open again, her pencil moving slowly, deliberately, as if each line carries weight beyond the page. Adrian does not announce his presence right away. He watches her for a moment, noticing the way she pauses before each stroke, not uncertain, but intentional, as if she is listening to something he cannot hear. "Show me," he says finally. Lena looks up, surprised for the first time since he has known her, not by his presence, but by his request. "Why?" she asks, her tone not defensive, just curious. Adrian steps closer, resting his hand lightly on the edge of the counter, his usual distance gone without him realizing it. "Because I do not understand it," he admits, the words unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable, but honest. Lena studies him for a second, searching for something in his expression, maybe doubt, maybe pride, but finding neither. Slowly, she turns the sketchbook toward him. The drawing is different from the others. Smaller, more personal. A single apartment unit, but designed in a way that feels open, the kitchen blending into the living space. Windows positioned to catch the softest light of the day. A corner carved out near the window with nothing but a chair and a small table. "That space," Adrian says, pointing. "What is it for?" Lena follows his gesture, her expression softening slightly. "It is where someone sits when they need to feel like themselves again," she says quietly. Adrian does not respond immediately. He just looks at the page, then back at her, something in his expression shifting, not dramatically, but enough to be felt. "You think people need that," he says. Lena holds his gaze, steady, certain. "I know they do." The words settle between them, heavier than anything that has been said before, because they are not about buildings anymore. They are about something deeper, something Adrian has never had to consider. For the first time, he does not have a counterpoint, does not have a reason to dismiss it, does not have control over the direction the conversation takes. And that absence of control does not feel like weakness. It feels like clarity. The next morning, Adrian makes a decision that surprises even himself. He calls his executive team and delays the project approval, requesting a full redesign, not based on efficiency, but on experience. There is pushback, confusion, questions he does not fully answer, because he does not yet have all the answers himself. But he knows enough to recognize that something has to change. That evening, when he returns home, he finds Lena in the same place she always seems to be, near the window, the city stretching out beyond her like a question waiting to be asked. He walks toward her without hesitation this time, stopping close enough that the space between them feels intentional, not accidental. "I changed the project," he says. Lena turns, her expression unreadable for a brief moment before something softer appears, not approval, not surprise, just acknowledgement. "Why?" she asks. Adrian exhales slowly, his gaze drifting briefly to the skyline before returning to her. "Because I realized I have been building places people pass through," he says, his voice quieter now, more grounded, "not places they stay." Lena does not smile, but there is something in her eyes that shifts, something that suggests she understands more than he has said. And in that quiet understanding, something new begins to form between them, not defined, not labeled, but present in a way neither of them can ignore. Adrian has spent his life believing he understood value, understood success, understood what it meant to create something lasting. But now, standing in front of the one person who sees through all of it, he realizes there is a difference between building something that impresses people and building something that holds them. And for the first time, he is not sure which one he has been chasing all along. And maybe you have felt that too. That quiet moment when something you believed in starts to shift just enough to make you question everything. Or when one person says something so simple it changes the way you see the world without even trying. The tension does not explode. It tightens, slowly, quietly, like something being pulled too far without anyone admitting it is about to break. It begins with a message Adrian does not expect, a brief update forwarded from his legal team regarding an older case tied to one of his earliest developments, something buried years ago, resolved on paper, forgotten in practice. He would have ignored it, the way he has ignored dozens of similar reports, but a single name catches his attention before he can dismiss it. Heart. The word does not immediately connect, not consciously, but something beneath recognition stirs, subtle and persistent. He reads further, slower this time. A structural issue. A lawsuit that never fully made it to trial. A small firm forced into closure after the settlement. The details are clinical, reduced to numbers and outcomes, but the impact behind them feels less contained now that he knows where to look. That evening, the penthouse feels different again, not because anything has changed physically, but because Adrian carries something into it that was not there before. Lena is at the table, her sketchbook open, but she is not drawing. She is staring at the page, unmoving, as if the lines she once trusted are no longer enough to hold whatever she is thinking. Adrian stands there for a moment longer than necessary, the silence between them stretching into something heavier than before. Your last name, he says finally, his voice quieter than usual, not controlled, not detached, just careful. It was not always just a coincidence, was it? Lena does not look up immediately. When she does, there is no surprise in her expression, no confusion, just a calm that feels almost expected. No, she says simply. Adrian steps closer, the distance between them no longer something he maintains out of habit, but something he crosses without realizing it. Your father, he continues, the pieces aligning now whether he wants them to or not. He designed residential projects, did not he? Lena nods once, slow, deliberate. He did. The confirmation lands heavier than any accusation could have. Adrian exhales, running a hand through his hair, something he rarely does, something that signals a loss of control he would never show in any other setting. One of my early developments, he says, more to himself than to her. There was a firm that filed against us, claimed the design compromised something fundamental, something about the way the structure handled stress, but it was dismissed, settled quietly. He pauses, the realization forming fully now, no longer avoidable. That was your father. Lena closes the sketchbook gently, not in anger, not in defense, but in finality, as if the conversation has reached a point she always knew it would. Yes, she says. There is no blame in her voice, no raised tone, just truth delivered without decoration. Adrian looks at her, really looks this time, not at the surface, not at what he assumed, but at what has been standing in front of him all along. And you still agreed to this, he says, disbelief threading through his words. You still married me knowing exactly who I was. Lena meets his gaze, steady, unwavering. I knew what you represented, she answers. That is not the same as knowing who you are. The distinction lands deeper than he expects. For the first time, Adrian feels something he cannot categorize, not guilt exactly, not regret in the way he understands it, but something closer to accountability, the kind that does not disappear just because it was never acknowledged before. You needed the money, he says, trying to anchor the situation in something logical, something he can process. Lena shakes her head slightly. I needed the chance to finish what he started, she says. The project he never got to complete, the one that actually cared about the people inside it. Adrian feels the weight of that, not as a direct accusation, but as a contrast he cannot ignore. Everything he built versus everything her father believed in. Efficiency versus meaning. Control versus intention. So this was never just a contract for you, he says quietly. Lena's expression softens just a fraction, not with sympathy, but with honesty. It was always more than that, she replies. The silence that follows is not empty. It is full, layered with everything neither of them said from the beginning, everything that has been building beneath the surface since the moment the veil was lifted. Adrian turns slightly, looking out at the city, the same skyline that once represented certainty, now feeling unfamiliar, almost distant. He has spent his entire life believing he understood cause and effect, believing that every decision led to a predictable outcome. But this was never part of the equation. And now, standing in the middle of something he did not anticipate, he realizes that the one person he thought he could define, from a single glance, has been shaping the entire narrative from the start, without ever raising her voice. He turns back to her, something unsettled in his expression, something real. You could have walked away, he says. Lena studies him for a moment, as if considering the weight of that statement before responding. So could you, she says quietly. And in that moment, the balance between them shifts completely, not in power, not in status, but in truth. Because for the first time, Adrian understands that this story was never his to control, and whatever comes next will not be decided by contracts or expectations, but by something far more difficult to navigate, something that does not follow rules, does not respond to authority, and cannot be undone once it fully reveals itself. Adrian does not speak about it again that night, not because it no longer matters, but because it matters in a way he has never learned how to address with words. Instead, he does something unfamiliar, something quiet, something that does not require permission or approval. The next morning, before the city fully wakes, he is already in his office, not behind the desk that defines his authority, but standing near the window with a stack of old project files spread across the table behind him. He has not looked at them in years. He never needed to. They represented decisions already made, outcomes already secured, problems already buried beneath success. But now, he turns each page slowly, not searching for numbers, not confirming profits, but tracing the details he once ignored, the early complaints, the overlooked adjustments, the notes that were dismissed because they did not align with the outcome he wanted. And there it is, clear now in a way it never was before, a design revision request from Lena's father, flagged and then overridden, labeled as unnecessary, inefficient, not cost-effective. Adrian closes his eyes for a brief second, not in regret, not yet, but in recognition, because for the first time, the consequences of that decision are no longer abstract. They are standing in his home, breathing quietly, drawing spaces that fix what he chose to leave incomplete. By mid-morning, his executive team is called into a meeting that was not scheduled, not announced, not optional. They sit across from him, expecting numbers, expecting direction, expecting control. What they do not expect is silence. Adrian does not begin with explanation. He does not justify. He simply places the file on the table and slides it forward. "We are reopening this case," he says. The words land heavier than any order he has ever given, not because they are louder, but because they are different. One of the executives hesitates. "It was settled years ago," he says carefully. "There is no legal obligation to revisit it." Adrian's gaze does not shift. "I am not asking about legal obligation," he replies. "I am addressing responsibility." The room stills. That word does not belong in their usual conversations. It does not drive profit. It does not secure deals. It does not align with the system they have all learned to operate within. And yet, here it is, reshaping the direction of everything without asking for approval. "We will compensate the original firm," Adrian continues. "And we will rebuild the project under new design standards." There are questions, of course there are, concerns about reputation, about cost, about precedent, but Adrian does not engage with them the way he used to. He listens, then answers only what matters, dismissing everything else not with arrogance, but with certainty that feels different from before, less about control, more about intention. By the time the meeting ends, the decision is no longer theoretical. It is set in motion. That evening, the penthouse feels different again, not because Lena has changed, but because Adrian has. He enters without hesitation, without distance, and finds her where she always seems to return, near the window, the city stretching out beneath her as if it belongs to no one. She looks up when he approaches, something in his presence already signaling that this moment is not like the others. Adrian does not start with explanation. He does not lead with apology. Instead, he places something on the table between them, a thin folder, worn at the edges, marked with a name she has not seen in years. Heart Design Group. Lena's hand stills for a fraction of a second before she reaches for it. Not quickly, not urgently, just deliberately, as if she is preparing herself for something she has already imagined but never expected to face again. She opens it slowly, her eyes moving across the pages, recognition settling in layers, quiet, controlled, but unmistakable. "You found it," she says softly. Adrian watches her, not interrupting, not explaining, just present in a way he has never been before. "I should have seen it earlier," he replies, his voice lower than usual, not guarded, not distant, just honest. Lena closes the folder, her fingers resting on the cover as if grounding herself in the reality of it. "Why now?" she asks, not accusing, not demanding, just needing to understand the shift. Adrian exhales slowly, the answer not simple, not clean, but real. "Because I finally understood what I ignored," he says. The words do not fix anything. They do not erase what happened, but they change something fundamental between them, something that was built on assumption now replaced with acknowledgement. Lena studies him for a long moment, searching for the part of him that would have dismissed this before, the version of him she expected when she agreed to this arrangement. But that version is no longer standing in front of her. In its place is someone quieter, more uncertain, but more present than she anticipated. "And what happens next?" she asks. Adrian does not answer immediately. He looks at her, then at the city, then back again, as if the answer is not something he can calculate, but something he has to choose. "We rebuild it," he says finally. "Not just the project, not just the design. Something else, something less visible, something that cannot be outlined on paper." Lena does not respond right away. She just looks at him, the weight of everything that has led to this moment settling into something new, something neither of them can fully define yet. And in that quiet space between what was and what might be, a question begins to form, not spoken, not answered, but impossible to ignore, because if he is willing to change something this foundational, then what else is he capable of becoming? And more importantly, what does that mean for the one person who has been standing in front of him all along, waiting not to be chosen, but to be seen? The first time Lena sees the building, she does not say anything. She stands across the street, hands loosely folded in front of her, her gaze steady as if she is not just looking at what is there, but everything that led to it. The structure is not towering, not meant to dominate the skyline the way Adrian's. Earlier projects always did. It is different. Softer in its presence, intentional in its openness, the glass catching light instead of reflecting it away, the entrance not elevated above the street, but level with it, welcoming rather than separating. People move in and out without hesitation, without the pause that usually comes before stepping into something unfamiliar. Adrian stands a few feet behind her, not beside, not leading, just there, watching her reaction instead of the building. He has spent months overseeing every detail, not as the man who dictates outcomes, but as someone learning how to listen, how to allow something to exist beyond his control. It is finished, he says quietly, though the words feel unnecessary. Lena nods once, still looking at it, her expression unreadable in the way that has always unsettled him. No, she replies after a moment. It is just beginning. Adrian lets that settle, understanding now that completion was never the point. They walk inside together, not as a performance, not as something for anyone else to witness, but as two people stepping into a space that carries more meaning than either of them expected. The air feels different immediately, lighter somehow, the sound softer, the layout guiding movement instead of forcing it. There are people here already, sitting, talking, existing in a way that feels natural, unguarded. Adrian notices it the way Lena always described, the subtle shift in posture, in breath, in presence. It is not impressive in the way his buildings used to be. It is something else entirely. It holds people. Lena moves slowly through the space, her fingertips brushing lightly against a wooden surface near the entrance, her gaze lifting toward the upper levels where light filters down in quiet layers. When she reaches the corner near the window, the one she once sketched, she stops. A single chair, a small table, nothing more. Someone is sitting there already, a woman reading, completely unaware that she is occupying a space that was once just a line on paper. Lena watches for a moment, then looks away, something in her expression shifting, not dramatic, but real. Adrian steps closer, close enough now that the distance between them no longer feels like something he needs to maintain. We named it after him, he says, his voice low, almost careful. Lena turns slightly, her eyes searching his, not for confirmation, but for intention. Heart Residences, he adds. The name hangs there, not as a gesture, not as compensation, but as acknowledgement. Lena exhales slowly, a breath she has been holding for longer than he realized. You did not have to do that, she says. Adrian shakes his head, the answer coming easier now than it ever would have before. I should have done it sooner. There is no apology attached to it, no attempt to undo what cannot be undone, just truth, simple and grounded. They stand there for a moment longer, the space around them filled with quiet life, people moving, existing, belonging without needing to question it. And in that stillness, something unspoken shifts into place, not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Lena looks at him then, really looks, not at the man she married for a reason, not at the man she expected, but at the one standing in front of her now. What happens when the contract ends? She asks, her voice soft but steady. Adrian does not answer immediately. He looks around, then back at her, his expression no longer guarded, no longer certain in the way it once was. Then we decide without one, he says. The simplicity of it is what makes it real. No conditions, no terms, just a choice. Lena holds his gaze, the question not fully resolved, but no longer defined by the same boundaries it once had. She does not say yes. She does not say no. She simply stays. And somehow, that feels like the most honest answer either of them could give. Because not everything needs to be concluded to be understood. Not everything needs to be labeled to be real. Sometimes, the most meaningful change is not in what is built, but in what is finally seen. And maybe that is the quiet truth this story leaves behind. That value is not measured by perfection, or status, or first impressions, but by the willingness to look again, to listen deeper, to change when it would be easier not to. And if this moment made you feel something, even quietly, then perhaps that is where it begins for you too. In the small decisions, the second looks, the questions you allow yourself to ask. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, you can support it in the simplest way, by liking, subscribing, and sharing, not because it is asked, but because something in it stayed with you long enough to matter.